Hello. We're coming to you live, except it won't be live when you watch it. We're coming to you from our fifth wheel that we actually had as our home for 18 months, and we thought we would turn it into our recording studio for Be Stronger Together. It was part of our grief journey, so why as well keep it in the family.
Yeah. It was a few years into our new journey. So, yeah.
It came with its own grief, though, because we actually moved out of our house and lived here. So it's also how we ended up in Cathlamet, which was not necessarily on purpose,
Nope.
but we're super glad that we did.
Yes.
God is good.
Yes.
We try to just do what he wants us to do.
Every time.
It's been a while since we've recorded a podcast, so we'll probably be really awkward.
Gonna be clunky.
Bear with us.
Lead them off.
I already did. You can do it now.
That's my turn.
You can talk about what we're talking about.
All right. So we're coming at this from a different angle. And obviously, everyone will have their own views on this.
What are we talking about today?
Anger and grief. I think we may have touched on it once before, but it's time to kind of expound on it just a little bit.
We're going to do a deep dive into being angry.
Yeah, at least as far as I can hold my breath.
Do you do that when you're angry sometimes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it never works, but I do it. So obviously there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Everybody has a method, a thing, a coping mechanism, call it what you will. It is different for everybody.
And every situation. You and I have very different situations that we were grieving from. So our experiences were different.
Oh yes, much. Yeah. And obviously the goal isn't to get to some imaginary goal line. Because for me it could be 100 yards, and for you it could be 1,000 yards.
Sure.
We don't know.
Right. And really, there's no prize at the end.
No.
I don't think there's actually really an end. It just sort of looks different as time goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, it does take on a different shape.
Right. So it's okay if you feel like, am I ever going to get to the end? The answer is no, you're not going to get to the end. But it will feel very different as time goes on.
Yeah.
Well, I was sitting at the window looking out at the water that goes by our house, the mighty Columbia River, and thinking about how grief is very much like a flowing river, that sometimes it's just kind of a gentle flowing presence outside your door, and it carries animals and ducks and fish and things past your window, and
Hot tubs.
sure, you may notice what's going by and you may not. Sometimes really big boats go by. And you may notice them and they don't really impact you, or they may wow you for a minute, but they don't really affect your life. And other times the tide comes up and it brings lots of flotsam and jetsam into your world, and you got to deal with that. Another tide, the tide goes out and exposes things you didn't know were there.
Yep.
And other times it becomes a raging storm and it wants to drag you under. And that's kind of what we're going to address today is how do you manage that being submerged in your grief, and how to deal with the anger that comes with it. Go to the scripture.
Are we at that point? Oh yeah, I guess we are. Okay, today's scripture is Ecclesiastes 11:10. Therefore, remove sorrow and anger from your heart, and put away pain from your body, for childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. You can spend a whole lot of time stomping your feet and holding your breath, or you can just embrace what has happened and find the way to move on.
Right. And God talks about anger in two different ways. He talks about how we should handle anger, which is letting it go and giving it to him. And then he talks about his anger and how his revenge is his. So while we can be angry at other people that may have done things that hurt us in our lives, that needs to be given to God to handle. We can't handle it, but He will, and He will handle it for us. Probably not in our lifetimes, or maybe
Sometimes he does.
sometimes,
Yeah.
but likely in His own way, probably not in our way. We want the whole lightning bolt being striking somebody down. That's probably not what's going to happen. So we just have to give all that to God like we do everything else. But I think some questions that I had is it okay to be angry? And on the flip side, is it okay if you don't feel angry while you're grieving? Some people never do feel mad. And
Yeah.
is that all right?
Yeah.
Again, no right or wrong to grieve.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, Ed, explain from your background, what has anger been for you and how did you navigate it through your grief journey?
So the only thing I had any anger issues over were people. People would ask me, "Are you mad at God because he took Michelle?" That's not how that works. But so it wasn't really anger so much as what's the word I'm looking for? I would I would look at them and have the look, "Are you stupid?" on my face. Well, I'm not sure what you would call that to be in polite society, but anyway,
Disbelief?
that works. So no, there was no anger for me, and um, my past was rooted in anger and hatred, and it was it was a dark childhood. Um, I choose to not turn to anger. I give it to God. Let Him deal with that for me.
Sure. And I come at anger from a different point of view. Um, we were always in trouble if we were mad. So, the whole if you don't stop crying, we'll give you something to cry about mentality. So, and being involved with a personality like I was for almost 30 years, it was not okay to be angry. It was okay for people to be mad at me. Anger at me was okay,
Yeah.
but anger turned against somebody else was not okay. So, feeling anger was one of the first things I had to deal with going through my process, and it was really hard to. I'm a people pleaser, so if I get mad at somebody, maybe they won't like me anymore, and I couldn't handle that. So being okay with saying I was mad about something that was a huge, huge leap for me to do that, and it used to take me sometimes up to 2 weeks to decide if I was angry and what I was angry about. And then it would take me, well, at least another 3 or 4 days to be able to put it into words. So obviously, the person that made me mad had completely forgotten about what I could possibly be angry about. And then I'm bringing it up, half a month later. By the way, that doesn't really work so well and for either person. But it took me a long, long time to get to the point where I was okay being angry and then verbalizing what I was upset about. I'm still not great at it, but I'm much better than I used to be.
She is.
Yeah. Uh, and I actually, uh, once I embraced being angry, it was actually my motivation to move forward in my life, which was very uncomfortable for me. I've never used anger as a motivating factor. So to use anger to propel me forward in where I truly felt God was moving me into was kind of like wearing somebody's coat that doesn't fit you or shoes that are really uncomfortable. It wasn't great. But um, Brene Brown put it, I think, really succinctly. And she said, anger is a beautiful, necessary catalyst for change, but a terrible lifetime companion. It is a necessary emotion. Emotions are neither good nor bad, they just are. And anger is there to ignite something. And that's what anger was for me. It had to ignite me to make changes because I was not happy. And my life was not productive in the ways that I felt like God wanted me to be productive. And there was so much hurt that was in my life that I needed to get rid of in order to be who God wanted me to be. This wasn't even about me in particular. It was about being a vessel for what God needed me to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. And as stated, it's okay to be, I'll paraphrase, it's okay to be angry, don't sin. So be angry, but be mindful of what you do with that emotion, because then that emotion can sprout off into half a dozen directions very easily, really quickly.
Hey, you find yourself in jail if you're not careful.
Yeah, you can. I've been told I'm not getting bailed out.
He's
So
not getting bailed out. He goes to jail. That's on him. He's
not,
going to have to call another
not
friend.
going to jail.
So anger isn't something that I think you need to justify, which again, I got used to get tangled up in that all the time. Is it okay to be angry? Is this worth being angry about? Is this okay to feel this way? I don't think yet. Now I realize I can just be angry. I don't have to try to give it a reason.
Right.
But and it may or may not be tied to whatever's happening in my life. It could be it scratched something from my past and brought it up. That
Which is,
definitely happens,
yeah, that's not uncommon.
right?
Yeah.
So anger can be a little leftover that's percolating in your mind, and it brings itself back up into your world. And again, it may take a little while to figure out, oh, that's what that was from. And it's okay to not understand that where those feelings come from. You don't have to justify it. It can just exist by itself. But I did have some ideas on other ways that anger can coexist with other feelings in grief.
Mhm.
So I'm going to have you read the first one.
So sorrow and anger can interconnect. We often feel angry, but when having to suffer an injustice or an unexpected loss.
Right. So you can be sad and angry at the same time. You can also feel angry about changes that are happening, changes that are potentially out of your control or are necessary as part of the grief process. I had a lot of changes that happened in my grief journey, and it seemed to just it was almost like a domino effect, and each one got bigger and bigger. Started with small change, and then just continued, and then eventually got smaller again. But um, change always, I think, comes in a grief journey. Sometimes it's you have to change where you live.
Yeah, and these things can be overwhelming.
Right. So you're having to pack up memories and decide what's worth hanging on to, and maybe move to a new place altogether in the same town, or completely change the state that you're living in. You may have to go back and live with children or parents, so that your whole life is uprooted. And maybe you're changing jobs. Certainly, you're changing relationships with the people around you, family and friends. That relationship changes. So expect that those are going to bring up feelings of anger.
Right.
Yeah. Even if the change ends up being a good one. I mean, I won't say that living in the fifth wheel was a sad change.
No.
It didn't bring up any anger necessarily. And it ended up being a great step into where we are now.
Yeah.
So you may not understand what the change is all about in the moment. And then a couple years down the road, you go, oh, okay, I see where that got me.
Yeah, because you couldn't see forward as to where that was going, but
Yeah. And especially in grief, it's really hard to see forward beyond this minute that you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can find anger linked to the loss itself. You can feel angry with ourselves or those who have been involved with the loss. Maybe we're angry with the person who is gone, or at God for taking the loved one. I do know people for whom that happened. I was not angry with God because he didn't take her, as a lot of people asked me. She had a physical defect in her left aorta, and nobody knew. It'd been there who knows how long. It just happened. And so I could have been angry. I could have crawled into a bottle. I could have done a whole bunch of stupid stuff. But there was no point in that. It didn't help the situation. And all that would do is make things worse. And that's not, to me, that's not the point of grief.
And some people take those feelings of anger and turn it into revenge.
Mhm.
And then that's what propels them forward. But that's not really getting you out of your grief journey.
No.
I think that's expanding your grief
Yeah.
and delaying the healing of the grief journey.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that you can't take actions if you feel like something needs to happen, maybe legally, you know,
Sure. Legally.
legally, Ed, but I think living, getting tangled up and reliving it over and over again and becoming vengeful about it is going to impede your grief healing.
It does. And again, it makes it worse.
Right.
Yeah. Because now you're building, not only do you have the grief you have to deal with, but now you have, again, remember I said it can take off in about 5, 6 different directions. And now you've got all these tendrils of other emotions and other things that will pile on top of that. And they definitely get in the way of the grieving process, the healing.
Right.
Yeah.
Which takes us to the next one where anger and envy can coexist as well, because we're watching people around us, maybe even people that were involved in our particular situation, and they look like they're doing better, or they got all the goods, or they don't have to change their lives, but I have to, or they look happy. How come I don't deserve to be happy? You know, they live a more sinful life than I feel I live, whatever the argument in your head is. But they have a bigger house, they have a nicer car, they've got the kids, whatever. So it's really easy, I think, for grief and anger and envy to kind of be a cesspool. And again, God tells us not to envy and covet, which can be a real challenge.
Well, thank God for Christ, because if I had to live up to the 10 Commandments,
Envy does get us nowhere. God gives us blessings even in our grief, and it's important to realize what those are and not try to have what somebody else has. But, I mean, unless you're really close to somebody, you actually have no idea what their internal struggles are. So while the outside might look pretty and shiny and big and bright, on the inside, that doesn't necessarily mean things are going well. So external witness doesn't necessarily reflect internal peace.
correct.
So I was actually mocked for living in our fifth wheel, and told that it was less than an ideal situation. And the line was said very sarcastically that we were living the dream. And in my perspective, we were living the dream. It was great.
Yeah.
It was a really cozy way to live for a little while. We had fun challenges that we had to figure out. We got to have campfires and be outside and live by the river. And I didn't see a negative point to it.
No.
Okay, the only thing I missed were my nighttime bathtub soaks, but other than that, it was great.
For me, I'm just a bit of a DIYer, and I didn't have any place to do my oil changes and tune-ups, and so that was the struggle for me. The rest of it was great.
Yeah, I mean, there were conveniences that were missed for sure.
Yeah.
Couldn't do real big shopping, and big expensive dinners or that kind of thing because there's really no place to really cook in here. So there were some that's what I'm looking for.
Logistical challenges.
Yeah, logistical challenges, things we had to adjust to for a little while. But we did, and it's kind of interesting to say, all right, well, I can't do that, but what can I do?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I want to talk a little more on a bigger scale, because we're past a world event that I don't think probably many of us have ever lived through, if any of us have ever lived through.
There were some that might still be alive, but
Yeah. But
very
so,
few.
yeah. And I think we were all thrown into a universal state of grief because we suddenly couldn't. There were people that, died without people around them. There were weddings that couldn't happen and funerals that weren't attended and businesses that closed and lives lost. And now we're on the other side of it. And I think the grief is starting to lift a little bit. Again, it never goes away. I think it's starting to fade a little bit. But I think for a lot of us, now comes the anger part. Why did that have to happen? How did we let that happen?
That's my bigger question.
Who was responsible for having that happen? And so, how do we as a society deal with anger issues? And there will always be something to be mad about in society, of course, because we don't all see things the same way. There are people that are angry that, not everybody participated in this thing the same way. It
Yeah.
was a lockdown. You should stay in your house. Some people didn't do that. You should wear a mask everywhere you go. Some people didn't do that. You should take on this experimental medical procedure, and some people didn't do that. And now there's people that are angry for those of us that chose a different way to participate. So how do we get past that? How do we come back together as a society and say, all right, you saw it your way, I saw it my way, we both survived it, and now how do we heal from that? How do we heal the friendships, the relationships, the trust that we have in each other? Because I think that's a big issue that we kind of don't really talk about. Well, we don't. Maybe other people are. Do you want to contribute to that at all?
I refuse to speak on that on because
Because you're so angry.
um, I have very strong opinions about it, and I will say I miss the old days where there were pitchforks and torches, and you just got things done. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay. So what do we do with that anger?
That's a good question.
We speak out.
Well, what do you do with the anger you have? There's nothing you can do for the other person who has anger.
Right.
So how do we come back together? Well, that is a two-sided
Right.
situation.
Right. Are we willing to forgive those that handled things differently than we did?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the forgiveness. Being told I can only travel from here to there. No, this is America. I'll travel where I want. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, the forgiveness is for ourselves. I've let that go. I
That's a
have.
good point. Yeah.
But the other side, if they're still angry, nothing I can do about that. And I'll be quite honest, there's nothing I'm going to do about that.
Good.
Um, I can't make that decision for them, nor do I want to. So,
That's good. I think it's something we have to all work on to move on to the next crazy thing that will happen that we'll have to figure.
yeah.
So I put down some tools for handling anger that I found useful when I was going through my angry phase of my life grief journey. You may have some other tools that you dealt with that you used.
Yeah, they're not here.
Can we speak of them?
Maybe.
Well, let's start with the easy one right now, and let's talk about talking it out.
Yeah.
To talk about your grief with somebody. Don't hold it in.
No. When you hold it in, it just turns inward, and it becomes so destructive, and it doesn't go away. It grows and gets worse and worse until something really bad usually happens.
So find a counselor, find a good friend, talk to your pet. It doesn't matter.
Goldfish, dog, cat. Well,
Doesn't
maybe
matter.
not a cat. Cats are indifferent. They don't care.
Cats are not. You got to get the right cat.
Oh, okay.
But don't hold it all in. And it's okay to talk about. It's important to talk about. And if you have a friend who doesn't understand it, find somebody else to talk about. Obviously, there are a lot of good grief counselors and programs for going through the grief process that you can utilize if that's going to help you. But you can't just hold it in and pretend it didn't happen
No.
or that you're not affected by it.
And if it's causing you grief, the scope of it is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if somebody else thinks it's tiny and shouldn't affect you. That's not for anybody else to say. That is for you, and it's okay to deal with that.
I'm a big believer. Start that again. I'm a believer in writing it out as well,
Yeah, journaling.
to journal it.
Yep.
Write it down, not type it out, not use the microphone on your phone to say it out, but actually go through the process of picking up a pen and paper. It doesn't have to be a fancy journal. It could be whatever. It could be a napkin. It doesn't matter what you write it on, but the physical process of writing it down physically changes your brain. So we know that our brain and our emotions are deeply tied. We're still working on how this all works, but
Yeah.
but the process of putting ink to paper changes how your brain starts the neural pathway healing and gets you out of whatever tangled mesh your brain keeps looping you into. And you don't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be pretty. I know in journaling, I had some days where I didn't even know how to say what was happening or how I felt about it. And I maybe just wrote down swear words or just drew lots of exclamation points or a lightning bolt. But I can't go back now and say, oh, yeah, that was the day that happened. I don't know what happened that day, but I just needed to get it down and out of the lock that it had on my mind. And I think you can keep those journals. I found it helpful. I found it very interesting to go back and read them a couple of years later, but even month by month to read it, because we're going to be talking about this in our next podcast. We're going to be talking about this in our next podcast, is how your perception of time is different during a grief situation.
Yeah.
So that will be coming. But it was interesting to me to look at the things that were happening in my journal versus how I saw them in my memory.
Yeah. Not the same thing as time dilation, but
Okay, we're not going to get into that. Do you want to read the next one?
Number 3, let's get physical. No, it's not quite that. It's get physical. And it's not what you think. I wanted to go, yeah. Oh, and then I read the thing. It's not that.
What were you thinking it was?
Throwing an elbow.
Oh, I see. Some people can see it differently.
Yeah. Anyway. It's tempting to cocoon ourselves to create safety, but you've got to, and this, even just, and talking it out is also that part of that physical aspect.
Right.
You've got to get out there. You've got to get moving, doing something. Like for me, I did a lot of walking. So you take a walk, go for a swim. You've got, as she stated here, throw some rocks at the water, or in the water, I guess, not at the water.
Depends on how good your aim is.
That's true. Yeah.
How big the rocks are.
So the physical aspect, there's a lot of chemistry going on in your grief. And I know you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I lost my appetite altogether. I lost a lot of weight. Obviously, I found it, but I lost it then. Your chemistry changes. Your appetite suppresses itself. You can be depressed, and I did find myself for about a week in a I didn't even know it happened. Until my dog looked at me and raised an eyebrow like, Dad, you need to get out of your pajamas, take a shower. He was
a smart dog.
These things happen, and the only way you get out of that is you have to go do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Which your walking actually brought you to me.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
And then we walked together.
Yeah.
And we didn't even really talk. We just walked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? What is it you called it?
Grief walking.
Grief walking. Yeah.
Yeah. You were sad walking. I was mad walking, and we got it out. And sometimes we'd say something, and a lot of times we just walked.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fine.
Yeah.
There were no expectations.
Word of warning. If you're grief walking with someone, if you're sad walking with someone who's mad walking, don't try to protect them and move them out of the street and up towards the sidewalk. Don't do that.
I think we have talked about that in a previous episode.
Yeah, I'm just.
I'd like to apologize for that, but I don't.
Don't
I don't apologize for that. Um, find an outlet for your grief. So, whether that's engaging with family members that make you feel happy, maybe you have grandchildren or a favorite aunt or somebody that makes you feel better, engage with them. Pick up something that taps into your creativity. And I firmly believe that everybody has something that they can be creative with. It doesn't mean you're an artist or a songwriter or a poet. It could be that you're really good at gardening, woodworking, cooking, organizing the garage, whatever, helping somebody else. I guess that's also something as an outlet is rather than constantly staying in a state of your own self-preservation, and God teaches this too, but by going out and serving other people, we get out of our own way a little bit, and that can definitely help us through our grief journey, is going to serve other people.
Yep.
So, um, I know when I excuse me. I know that when I tap into my creative side, it engages a different part of my brain, and it re-engages me with kind of who I am at my core, because in grief you're completely shift away from who that is.
Right.
So, what creative things do you think that you have that help you?
I'll go fix something.
Yeah,
I'll find something that is pretty much broken. And even if I can't fix it, I try.
right.
Yeah.
And then there's that sense of accomplishment. There's a feeling of connecting with something outside yourself.
Yeah. And I'm focused on something other than what I'm angry about, grieving,
Right.
whatever the emotion happens to be. I'm outside of that. I'm focused on something else.
So I'm going to talk about the next one, even though it's your turn. But
You just all you want.
so I'm going to talk about breaking down anger into smaller pieces, or finding a way to put a to give it an outlet. So one of the things that you taught me in my grief journey was learning how to shoot, which was way outside my comfort zone. I had shot BB guns before, but that was about it.
Very anti-gun.
Well,
Was.
I have changed, but there was a visual experience of we shot poor victims like pumpkins or tin cans or nothing critical, but the process of taking that aggression out on something that way, I mean, it is a violent way to do it, but violence and anger go together, and you have to have a safe outlet for that. We don't recommend shooting outside of a safety protocol,
No.
but
You make sure you've got a berm, a range,
sure,
follow all
somebody
this
who knows what
protocols.
they're
Yeah.
doing. Don't go out and do this by yourself if you've never done this before.
Yeah.
I think you should always have somebody with you in case there's a problem.
Yeah.
But there was a moment where you were teaching me how to aim, which I don't have great eyes, so that was sort of a miracle that I could hit the side of anything. And there was a pumpkin with a stem on it, and you challenged me to blow the stem off the pumpkin, and I'll be lucky to hit the pumpkin, let alone the stem. But you gave me a visual image of what I was blowing off that pumpkin and what happened.
She got into a prone position, took the bead, did the breath, pulled the trigger, stem went off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It felt really good.
Look at that.
Yeah. So, I know that for some people, throwing rocks in the water, you can even write on the rock things that you're angry about or who you're angry with, and just write it out with a Sharpie or whatever and toss it in the river. And just the fact of letting that go is, can be relieving. So I had another moment. Again, I'm not a violent person. Don't ask my brother because he'll tell you differently, but that's siblinghood. Um, but I'm typically not a violent person. But there was a moment where I was very angry and felt betrayed by somebody close to me. And it was very painful. And I was at my flower shop and I had a box of little bud vases that were going to be in the garbage because they were cracked or not.
Chipped,
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever. They weren't going to be of any value to me. And there was a big concrete wall behind my flower shop, so I took them outside and I threw them at the wall, which again was pretty irresponsible, but it felt really good to just watch that glass explode and take the things that I was feeling and putting it into something and then having that something come apart. There was just a really physical, emotional tie to that thing. Left a huge mess. There's probably still glass shards sitting back there. We cleaned it up as best we could.
No, we cleaned it up pretty well.
But again, we're not recommending that you commit any sort of violence that will hurt anybody else. But if you need to go out and throw rocks at bottles and clean it up when you're done or whatever, it's okay to do that. It's okay to go skeet shooting or jump out of an airplane with a parachute or
Jump out of an airplane without a parachute.
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. It's not what we're talking about. But sometimes taking yourself into a physical expression of that anger can help you deal with that anger.
Yeah.
Just don't take it out on somebody physically. No.
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 Because she said so.
I think God said so too. It's not just me. Okay, you can take the next one.
So you've got recreate your surroundings. Looking at the familiar places or things can make us angry. Actually, this should be yours. In my
You get to
case,
do this.
seeing my once, this doesn't apply to me though. You take it. This more applies to you.
All right. So looking at familiar things or places can bring up anger. I know that looking at things that I thought were very important to me, precious to me, being thrown in the garbage or a heap in my driveway or put out in the rain really hurt my heart because those things were, for one reason or another, were important to me. I was with a friend when I got it, or I thought I needed it for something, or and seeing those things discarded so dramatically, I guess. So without any sort of appreciation of what that meant to me was really hurtful. It was another way to hurt me is what it was, and I felt it and I let it hurt me. And I couldn't do a whole lot about it. I just had to let a lot of it go, which was a reminder that God teaches us to not put our treasures here on earth, but the treasures in heaven are the ones that will be everlasting, and that our earthly treasures will mean nothing at some point. And I was very reminded of that. And at that point, I was pretty mad about everything. There was a constant visual reminder of the unraveling of what I had built in my life.
That was a big deal.
It was a big deal. And so I moved into something that was much smaller than what I was used to living in and had very few things that were familiar to me around me. There was a couple, but not much. So, but in the process of recreating a space just for me, helped me to quell some of that anger.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, that's definitely part of the grief journey is sometimes you have to sell your stuff and move somewhere else and then realize that it's just stuff.
It's just stuff.
It's just stuff. Although I will say that I was able to rescue my fabric collection and going through it recently, and it's only one bag of fabric. And they're small pieces. They're small pieces of fabric, but I have hauled them around to several different places. But revisiting those, putting them out now and revisiting some of those has made me very happy. It's like seeing an old friend, like, oh my goodness, I forgot I even had this. And at one point I made curtains out of it for this home that I lived in or something. So it's kind of fun to have things that, that remind you of happy.
That's why I have as many tools as I have.
Yeah.
Because that makes me happy.
Because that makes you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never can't find that 10mm socket.
So how many do you have now?
Well, I've probably got 100, but I don't know where any of them are.
Yeah. Um, eventually, I think in rearranging your world around you, for me anyway, gratitude started to replace the anger.
Of course.
Then I was just grateful for anything I had because I lost so much that when I was given things, um, or found things that I thought had been lost, then the gratitude got bigger than the anger had been. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was good. Okay, you want to take the last one then?
Let's see. Let it be. Don't dismiss anger as an important emotion.
It's totally normal to feel angry in your grief journey.
Yeah.
You don't need to dismiss it. You don't need to give it a reason for being.
And as you put here, you don't need to justify it. Sometimes you can't justify it. I guarantee you, what if you do something stupid with it, you cannot justify it. Don't do that. That's the no-no,
Right.
right? But you don't have to justify the emotion, because different things upset people in different ways.
Right. Things that are going to make me angry aren't going to upset you at all,
No,
and vice versa.
yeah,
But I don't have to try to manage that for you.
no,
I don't have to say
no. And if
you shouldn't be mad about that.
and if it's something that wouldn't make me angry and you try to justify it to me, I'm not going to blow it off, but I'm not going to understand either.
Sure.
So it's not necessary to do that.
Yeah, anger is a very personal thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But if you ignore it or you deny it, it becomes a beast.
yeah,
It becomes a monster.
yeah.
And then it's going to show up in other ways in your life. I mean, it could make you sick.
It can. Yeah, the stress tank your immune system, and
Yeah.
you're miserable,
Right.
or
Not taking care of yourself.
or it shows up at a place and time that it shouldn't. You say something
Right.
you don't really mean,
Right.
but you can't unring the bell.
Yep.
Now you've got another situation.
Right.
And don't do that.
Don't do that.
Mm.
So go back to the list of ways to manage the anger and stay out of the gutters of revenge, vengeance, behavior that's going to be harmful to somebody else in any way, whether it's somebody you know or somebody you don't know, or
Yeah.
somebody you mean a bar, whatever.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Just say it.
Yeah. Oh. Is there anything else you want to say about anger?
No. Just know that it happens. It exists. If you get angry about something, it's not a failure. If you're going to fail in it, it's going to be what you do with it.
That's good.
Right? Don't. Yes, go throw darts at a dartboard, or go split 4 cords of firewood with a 12-pound split maul. Express that. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Those are good things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go scratch, key somebody's car.
No.
Don't. No. That doesn't resolve the anger, by the way. Don't. It doesn't help.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're going to see how this one goes.
No.
We may have to re-record it. I don't know. But we're glad that you guys are in this journey with us and hope that what we're saying is helpful. As a reminder, we are not trained podcasters, nor are we trained psychological counselors. We're just two people that have been through a journey separately, and now we're on our journey together. And by being in it together, we're stronger.
Yeah.
But just know that you, because you're on this journey with us, that strength is for you too.
And I'm going to say this, not to depress anybody, but between us, we have 122 years of life experience.
How?
So we're just sharing.
Well, and the reality is, grief will touch everybody's life.
Oh, yeah. Sadly.
It
yeah.
does. We're not escaping it.
No, it is a part of life.
It is over and over again. It's not even something we experience one time.
Yeah.
We have two parents, potentially have children, potentially have spouses.
Uncles, aunts.
Sure. Dogs.
Dogs.
For
cats.
Dogs, cats. Yeah. Pets.
Fish.
Sure.
Yeah.
Grief is gonna be in our lives And we've got to find a way to talk about it out loud, to manage it, to be kind to each other as we're going through grief, and as a society to recognize that other people are grieving and how to kindly help people through their grief journey.
Yeah.
It doesn't do any good to ignore it.
No.
Yeah. If you'd like to connect with us, if you'd like to be a part of our podcast, we would invite you to come and talk with us, or we can even do this remotely if you don't live nearby. We would love to have you participate and be a guest.
If you've gone through anything in your life and you would like us to, bring the topic up, give you our perspective, point of view. Again, we're not professionals, but we we're human and we understand people go through stuff. So yeah, we'd be more than happy to assist.
You're not alone on your journey.
No, not with 330 million people just in the United States.
Right.
It's amazing you can find a square yard that you don't have to share with somebody, but
Well, our next podcast, we'll be talking about time and how time in grief can feel very different than a normal day, and how time can sometimes take forever to pass and sometimes goes by very fast and you don't even know what happened.
so do I get to talk about time dilation in that one?
If you want to, but you can fast forward through stuff you don't want to hear. Or you don't understand. Or you don't care about.